Tio continued without success. His ships were suffering constant minor failures from the harsh environment, and several had been forced to retreat for repairs. The primitive humans seemed to thrive in conditions that challenged his advanced fleet. "Admiral, we are detecting movement near the old research station," reported Sensor Officer Darwin. "It could be the human vessel." Kethavar ordered his remaining ships to converge on the research facility, but he was walking into a trap that used Zephyrian science against itself. The Liberty emerged from behind the automated station and began releasing clouds of exotic particles directly into the path of the approaching alien fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating. As the strange particles came into contact with the Zephyrian ships, their exotic matter reactors began shutting down automatically to prevent dangerous instabilities. One by one, the beautiful crystal vessels went dark and dead in space. "What is happening?" Kethavar demanded as his own ship systems began failing. "The particles are interfering with our power cores, Admiral," reported Chief Engineer Tekvar. "All ships are being forced into emergency shutdown to prevent reactor breaches." The Liberty flew past the disabled Zephyrian fleet, like a shark swimming through a school of sleeping fish. Jake Morrison had turned the alien's own advanced technology into a weakness while his primitive chemical engines kept running without any problems, Captain. "We are clear of the Nebula and the Zephyrian. Ships are still disabled," Amy Sullivan reported with amazement. "How long before they can restart their engines?" "According to their own research data, at least 6 hours, Dr. Nash replied. "More than enough time to reach the edge of their territory." But Jake Morrison was not finished surprising the galaxy. Instead of running away, he ordered Lisa Carter to send a message back to the disabled Zephyrian fleet. "Admiral Kethavar, this is Captain Morrison," the transmission said. "Your ships will be fine once the particles disperse. We are leaving your territory now, but want you to know that humans prefer to solve problems with brains rather than force. We hope your empire will remember that if we ever meet again." 6 hours later, Admiral Kethavar's fleet finally managed to restart their engines and escape from the nebula that had become their prison. The Zephyrian commander was furious, humiliated, and desperate to salvage what remained of his reputation. The entire galaxy had watched his advanced fleet being disabled by a primitive cargo ship, using the Empire's own research against them. "Admiral, we are receiving a priority transmission from the High Command," Sub-Commander Veltar reported with obvious nervousness. "Grand Admiral, Forthak wants a full explanation for why the Imperial fleet has become the laughingstock of the galaxy." Kethavar knew his career was probably over, but he still had one chance to redeem himself. The human ship had escaped Zephyrian territory, but they had to be heading somewhere. If he could track them to their home system and capture their entire species, he might still emerge from this disaster with some honor intact. "Plot an intercept course for human space," he ordered. "We will follow them home and finish this properly." The Liberty was indeed heading home, but Captain Jake Morrison was no longer alone. As his battered ship limped toward human territory, it was joined by another vessel that had been waiting at the edge of Zephyrian space. The UES Defiant was everything the Liberty was not. Where the garbage scow was ugly and functional, the Defiant was sleek and purposeful. Where the Liberty carried salvage equipment, the Defiant bristled with weapons designed by human engineers who had studied alien technology and improved upon it. Captain Helen Rodriguez commanded the Defiant, and she greeted her fellow captain with a mixture of relief and amazement. "Jake, what the hell have you been doing out there?" she asked over the communication link. "Half the galaxy is talking about your escape from the Zephyrian fleet." "Just showing them that humans do not give up easily," Jake replied with exhaustion in his voice. "But Helen, I need you to know that they will probably follow us home. This is not over. Let them come," Helen said with confidence that Jake found reassuring. "We have been preparing for this possibility ever since we detected their expansion toward our territory." The two human ships continued toward Earth, while behind them, Admiral Kethavar's fleet followed at maximum speed. The Zephyrian commander was determined to capture both vessels and finally demonstrate Imperial superiority over this troublesome species. What Kethavar did not know was that human space had been busy during his week-long chase of the Liberty. Intelligence reports about Zephyrian technology and tactics had been analyzed by human military scientists who specialized in asymmetric warfare. The same creativity that had allowed Jake Morrison to escape from superior forces had been applied to larger strategic problems. "Admiral, we are approaching the edge of human territory," reported Navigation Officer Yeldam. "Our sensors detect 2 human vessels ahead, but no sign of defensive installations." This seemed to confirm Kethvar's assumption that humans were a primitive species with limited military capabilities. He ordered his fleet to attack formation and prepared to demonstrate proper imperial justice to both human ships. The first surprise came when Captain Rodriguez transmitted a message that was heard across Zephyrian space. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Helen Rodriguez of the United Earth ship Defiant. Before you do something that will start a war, I should probably mention something important about my colleague Captain Morrison. Jake?" Morrison's voice came over the communication channel, sounding embarrassed but amused. "Admiral, I guess I should have introduced myself properly when we first met. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the UES Liberty, and yes, she is a starship in the United Earth Fleet, but the Liberty is not a warship." There was a pause that seemed to last forever before Jake continued. "She is a garbage scow. We collect space debris and abandoned satellites. You have spent the last week chasing our trash collection ship across 3 star systems." The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Across Zephyrian space, millions of citizens who had been following the chase suddenly realized that their mighty Imperial fleet had been outmaneuvered by sanitation workers. "If you want to see what our actual military ships can do," Captain Rodriguez added with deadly calm, "we would be happy to provide a demonstration." Admiral Kethvar felt his world collapsing around him. The primitive vessel that had humiliated his entire fleet was not even a proper warship. It was the equivalent of a flying garbage truck that had made his advanced technology look worthless through nothing but human stubbornness and creativity. "Admiral," Subcommander Veltar whispered, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach to this situation." But before Kethvar could respond, the space around both human ships began filling with new contacts. Human military vessels emerged from hidden positions throughout the system, using stealth technology that the Zephyrians had not detected. Each ship was different from the others, showing the chaotic diversity of human engineering compared to the standardized elegance of Imperial designs. The human fleet did not form neat formations or create beautiful light displays. Instead, they moved like a pack of predators surrounding prey, with each ship taking positions that maximized their tactical advantages. Their weapons were crude by Zephyrian standards, but there were so many of them that elegance became irrelevant. "Admiral, we count 47 human warships," reported Sensor Officer Darwin with barely controlled panic. "They have us completely surrounded, and their weapons are powered and targeting our vessels." Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the communication channel again. "Admiral Kethvar, the United Earth government has authorized me to negotiate on behalf of our species. We are willing to establish diplomatic relations with the Zephyrian Empire based on mutual respect and equality. However," she continued with steel in her voice, "if you prefer to continue this conflict, we are prepared to defend ourselves. The choice is yours." Admiral Kethvar found himself in a position that no Zephyrian commander had faced in 3 centuries of expansion. He was outnumbered by a species that had already proven they could turn any disadvantage into an advantage. His beautiful ships were surrounded by crude human vessels that looked like they had been built in different factories by engineers who could not agree on basic design principles. But those ugly ships carried weapons that human scientists had developed after studying Zephyrian technology and finding ways to improve it. Where the Empire focused on elegance and efficiency, humans had focused on redundancy and raw power. Where Zephyrians built perfect systems, humans built systems that kept working even after taking massive damage. "I request safe passage through human space," Kethvar transmitted with what little dignity remained to him. "Granted," Captain Rodriguez replied immediately. "You and your fleet are welcome to return to Zephyrian territory in peace. We hope this will be the beginning of better relations between our species." The aftermath of what became known as the Great Chase reshaped galactic politics in ways that no one had anticipated. Other species that had been absorbed into the Zephyrian Empire began questioning whether imperial protection was really necessary. Some even started demanding independence based on the human example. The Zephyrian Empire found itself facing rebellion and diplomatic challenges across dozens of star systems. Captain Jake Morrison was having his morning coffee when the alarm bells started ringing throughout the UES Liberty. The ship shook slightly as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the Kepler system. Jake put down his cup and walked quickly to the bridge where his crew was already at their stations. "What do we have, Lisa?" Jake asked his communications officer, Lisa Carter. She was bent over her console with headphones on and her face showed confusion. "Captain, we are getting signals from multiple sources and they are not speaking any language in our database," Lisa said while adjusting her equipment. "The signals are coming from 17 different directions and they all seem to be trying to talk to us at the same time." Jake looked at the main screen, which showed empty space around them. The Liberty was a simple ship with basic sensors so they could not see very far into the darkness. Amy Sullivan, who worked as their tactical officer, was running scans as fast as she could. "Captain, I am picking up movement all around us," Amy said with worry in her voice. "There are ships out there, but they are not showing up clearly on our screens. They seem to be using some kind of technology that makes them hard to detect." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Liberty was not a military ship and had no weapons to speak of. They were just collecting old satellites and space junk in this sector when whatever was happening started. The crew of 40 people on board were engineers and technicians, not soldiers. "Lisa, can you make any sense of what they are saying?" Jake asked while trying to stay calm for his crew. "I think so, Captain," Lisa replied while working on her translation programs. "They are using mathematical sequences that seem universal. Basic numbers and shapes that any spacefaring species would understand. From what I can tell, they want us to stop moving and wait for them to approach us." "Are they friendly?" Jake asked, even though he already suspected the answer would not be simple. "Hard to say, Captain, but their tone seems formal, like they are following some kind of procedure," Lisa answered. "They keep repeating the same message over and over in all those different languages." Suddenly, the space around the Liberty began to shimmer and glow. Ships started appearing out of nowhere as if they had been invisible moments before. Jake counted at least 20 vessels surrounding them, and each one was unlike anything he had ever seen in human space. The alien ships looked like they were made of crystal and light. Their hulls seemed to bend and twist the starlight around them, creating rainbow patterns that hurt to look at directly. They moved without any visible engines or exhaust and made no sound that the Liberty could detect. Each ship was at least 3 times larger than the Liberty and shaped like elegant teardrops. "My God," Amy whispered while staring at the display. "Captain, those ships are beautiful, but they could destroy us without even trying." Jake knew she was right. The Liberty was basically a flying metal box with engines stuck on the back. Compared to these graceful alien vessels, his ship looked like something built by children using scrap metal. The human ship had scratches and dents from years of collecting space debris, while the alien ships looked like works of art. "Captain, they are sending us a new message," Lisa said with excitement. "This one has pictures and sounds. I think they are trying to introduce themselves." The main screen filled with images of a vast civilization spanning hundreds of star systems. Cities that floated in space without planets to support them. Massive structures that harvested energy directly from stars. Ships that moved faster than anything humans had ever built. The aliens called themselves the Zephyrian Empire, and they had been expanding across the galaxy for over 300 years. The message showed how the Zephyrians would approach primitive species and offered them protection in exchange for joining their empire. They provided advanced technology, medical care, and education to any species that accepted their generous offer. The presentation made it clear that refusal was not really an option. Admiral Kethvar commanded the Zephyrian fleet that had surrounded the human ship. He floated in his command chamber, which was filled with a methane atmosphere that his species needed to breathe. His 4 eyes studied the primitive vessel with amusement while his communication officers prepared the standard first contact package. "Look at that design," Kethvar transmitted to his fellow officers using thought speech. "They are still using chemical rockets for propulsion. Their hull is made of simple metal alloys that we stopped using millennia ago. This species has barely left their home system." The other Zephyrian officers shared his amusement. Sub-Commander Veltar activated the recording systems so that citizens across the Empire could watch the encounter. First contact with primitive species was always entertaining for the advanced Zephyrians, who had long ago forgotten what it was like to struggle with basic technology. "Shall we begin the standard welcome procedure, Admiral?" Veltar asked while his mandibles clicked with laughter. "Yes, but let us make this special," Kethvar replied. "Broadcast this encounter to the entire Imperial network. Our citizens will enjoy watching another backward species join the Empire." The Zephyrian ships moved into perfect formation around the Liberty. Their movements were synchronized like a dance and created beautiful light patterns in space. The display was meant to show the humans how advanced and powerful their new masters were. Back on the Liberty, Jake watched the alien show with growing concern. His crew was frightened but trying to stay professional. These aliens clearly expected humans to be impressed and grateful for their attention. "Captain, they are requesting permission to come aboard," Lisa reported. "They want to begin what they call integration procedures. From their message, it sounds like they expect us to surrender our ship and crew to them immediately." Jake thought about his options. The Liberty carried no weapons that could threaten these advanced ships. Running away seemed impossible when they were surrounded by vessels that could probably catch them easily. Fighting was out of the question. But something about the aliens' attitude bothered Jake. They seemed to assume that humans would just give up without question. They acted like they had done this same thing hundreds of times before with other species. Their confidence was complete and unshakable. "Send them a message, Lisa," Jake said after thinking for a moment. "Tell them we appreciate their welcome, but we are just passing through this area. We will be leaving now and do not require their assistance." Lisa stared at her captain with shock. "Sir, are you sure about that? They clearly expect us to surrender." "Send the message," Jake repeated firmly. The response from the human ship caused confusion throughout the Zephyrian fleet. In 3 centuries of expansion, no primitive species had ever refused their offer of protection. The recording of Captain Morrison's polite but firm refusal would soon become the most watched transmission in Imperial history. Admiral Kethvar could not believe what his translation systems were telling him. The primitive humans in their crude metal ship had just declined the generous offer of the Zephyrian Empire. In 300 years of expansion across the galaxy, no species had ever refused their protection. Did they just say no? Sub-Commander Veltar asked, while his 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. His mandibles clicked nervously as he tried to understand what had happened. "Play back the transmission," Kethvar ordered while floating closer to his command screens. The recording showed the human captain speaking, in clear, simple words that left no room for misunderstanding. The message had been broadcast live across the Imperial network and was already causing confusion among Zephyrian citizens. Comment streams filled with questions about how primitive species were supposed to behave during first contact. Many Zephyrians assumed there had been a translation error. "Perhaps they do not understand our offer," suggested Communications Officer Darwin. "Their technology is so primitive they may not realize what we are giving them." Kethvar agreed that this must be the problem. He ordered his fleet to transmit additional information about the benefits of joining the Empire. The new message included detailed scans of Zephyrian cities' medical technology and starships. Surely once the humans saw what they could have, they would reconsider their foolish refusal. On the Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien presentation with his senior officers. The Zephyrian technology was impressive beyond anything humans had achieved. Their ships could travel between stars in days rather than months. Their medical science had eliminated disease and extended lifespans to thousands of years. Their cities were marvels of engineering that housed billions of beings in perfect harmony. "Captain, this is incredible," said Chief Engineer Steve Parker while studying the technical data. "If we could learn even a fraction of their science, it would advance human civilization by centuries. They are offering us everything we have ever dreamed of," added Dr. Kevin Nash, who served as the Liberty's science officer. "Clean energy faster than light travel, perfect health for everyone. How can we possibly refuse?" Jake understood his crew's excitement, but something still bothered him about the aliens' approach. They spoke like parents talking to children. Their entire presentation assumed that humans would be grateful and eager to give up their independence in exchange for advanced technology. "What exactly are they asking for in return?" Jake asked while reviewing the alien message again. Lisa Carter worked on translating the more complex parts of the Zephyrian offer. "From what I can understand, Captain, they want complete integration into their empire. Human ships would be replaced with their designs. Our government would report to their administrators. All human colonies would follow imperial law. So they want us to become part of their civilization," Jake said slowly. "More than that, sir," Lisa replied. "They want us to stop being human and become junior Zephyrians instead." The bridge fell silent as the crew considered this. The aliens were offering incredible gifts, but the price was humanity's freedom to make its own choices. They would become pets in a vast alien empire no matter how comfortable their cage might be. Send another message, Lisa, Jake ordered. Thank them again for their generous offer, but tell them we prefer to remain independent. We are leaving now. Admiral Kethavar received the second human refusal with growing anger. The primitive species was not only refusing Imperial protection, but actively rejecting it multiple times. This had never happened in the entire history of Zephyrian expansion. Perhaps they are testing us, suggested Veltar. Some species try to negotiate better terms by pretending disinterest. No, Keithvar replied after studying the human captain's expression. They genuinely believe they can simply leave. They do not understand that refusing the Empire is not an option. The Admiral made a decision that would soon be regretted throughout Zephyrian space. He ordered his ships to block the human vessel's path and prevent it from leaving the system. If the humans would not accept Imperial protection willingly, then they would receive it whether they wanted it or not. Attention, human ship, Kethavar transmitted. You are now under Imperial authority. Prepare to be escorted to the nearest processing station where you will receive proper education about your new status. The response from Captain Morrison was immediate and shocking. Instead of surrendering, the Liberty began moving away from the Zephyrian fleet at maximum speed. The human ship's primitive chemical engines flared to life and started accelerating toward the edge of the star system. They are running, Veltar observed with disbelief. A cargo hauler is trying to outrun the Imperial fleet. The situation struck most Zephyrians as comedy rather than crisis. The human ship looked like a flying metal brick compared to their graceful vessels. It moved with all the elegance of a falling rock and left a trail of engine exhaust that their sensors could track from light years away. This should be entertaining, Kethavar said while ordering pursuit. Let them run for a few hours until their primitive engines burn out, then collect them. What the Admiral did not know was that the Liberty carried emergency modifications that most human ships received when operating in dangerous space. Chief Engineer Steve Parker had been quietly preparing these systems since the aliens first appeared. Captain, I have vented all non-essential materials and switched to emergency power, Steve reported. We are running as light and fast as this old girl can manage. How long can we maintain this speed? Jake asked. Maybe 6 hours before the engines overheat, Steve replied. But Captain, there might be another option. If we can reach the asteroid belt in this system, we could try to lose them in the rocks. Amy Sullivan, who was monitoring the alien pursuit, shook her head. Captain, those ships are 3 times faster than us and their sensors are incredible. They will catch us long before we reach any asteroids. But Jake had spent years collecting space debris and knew how to think like salvage rather than prey. Steve, can you make us look like we are having engine trouble? Already on it, Captain, Steve replied with a grin. I am venting coolant and reducing thrust to make it look like our engines are failing. The Zephyrian fleet watched as the human ship began showing signs of mechanical failure. Engine output dropped and the vessel started venting atmosphere and fluids. Admiral Kethavar felt satisfied that the primitive technology was finally breaking down under stress. Reduce speed and prepare to assist them, he ordered. We do not want their crewed ship to explode before we can collect the crew. This was exactly what Jake had hoped for. As the alien ship slowed down to match the Liberty's apparently failing engines, he gave Steve the signal to execute their real plan. All stop, Jake ordered. Cut main engines and go to silent running. The Liberty suddenly went completely dark and cold in space. Its engines shut down, its lights went out, and even its life support system switched to battery power. To the Zephyrian sensors, the human ship appeared to have suffered complete system failure. They have lost power, reported Sensor Officer Darwin. Their ship is dead in space. What the aliens did not realize was that the Liberty was now drifting silently toward the asteroid belt, using momentum and gravity rather than engines. The Zephyrians moved closer to rescue what they assumed was a disabled vessel, but they had lost track of exactly where the human ship was in the darkness of space. The Liberty drifted through space, like a dead whale floating in an ocean of stars. Inside the ship, Captain Jake Morrison and his crew waited in darkness while their life support systems ran on emergency batteries. The temperature was dropping fast and everyone wore heavy jackets to stay warm. How long can we maintain silent running? Jake whispered to Chief Engineer Steve Parker. Maybe 2 hours before we freeze or run out of air, Steve replied quietly. But if this works, we should be in the asteroid belt by then. The Zephyrian ship spread out across the area searching for the disabled human vessel. Their sensors were incredibly advanced, but they were designed to detect active starships, not cold metal drifting through space. The Liberty had become invisible to their sophisticated technology simply by turning everything off. Admiral Kethvar was growing frustrated with the search. "How does a primitive ship simply disappear?" he demanded from his officers. "Perhaps it exploded, sir," suggested Sub-Commander Veltar. "Their crude engines might have caused a catastrophic failure that vaporized the entire vessel." "Impossible," Kethvar replied. "Our sensors would have detected an explosion. That ship is out there somewhere and I want it found." The search continued for an hour, while the Liberty slowly drifted toward the asteroid field. Jake watched the alien ships through the viewports as they moved back and forth looking for his vessel. Their beautiful crystal hulls caught starlight and created amazing patterns, but Jake was too worried to appreciate their beauty. "Captain," whispered Navigation Officer Claire Mitchell, "we are approaching the asteroid belt. Should I fire up the maneuvering thrusters to adjust our course?" "Not yet," Jake replied. "Let gravity do the work as long as possible." The Liberty was heading directly toward a gap between two large asteroids that Claire had calculated would hide them from most sensor scans. But they needed to time their entry perfectly to avoid crashing into the floating rocks. 30 seconds to contact, Claire warned while checking her calculations again. Jake waited until the last possible moment before giving the order. "Light her up, Steve. Full power to maneuvering thrusters and emergency thrust." The Liberty suddenly blazed to life in the darkness of space. Its engines fired at maximum power while maneuvering thrusters spun the ship to align with the asteroid gap. The burst of activity only lasted a few seconds before the ship disappeared into the rocky maze of the asteroid belt. "There," shouted Sensor Officer Darwin as he detected the brief energy signature. "The human ship is in the asteroid field." Admiral Kethvar ordered immediate pursuit, but his beautiful crystal ships were not designed for flying through fields of floating rocks. The Zephyrian vessels had to move slowly and carefully to avoid damaging their elegant hulls, while the Liberty bounced and tumbled through the asteroids like it was built for this kind of rough flying. "How are they moving so fast through those rocks?" Veltar asked with amazement. "They should have been destroyed by now." The truth was that human ships were built to survive rough treatment. The Liberty had thick metal armor and redundant systems that could keep working even after taking serious damage. The Zephyrian ships were masterpieces of engineering, but they were delicate compared to the crude human vessel. Steve Parker was pushing the Liberty's engines far beyond their normal limits. "Captain, these old chemical rockets were not designed for this kind of stress," he reported, while watching temperature gauges climb into dangerous zones. "How much more can she take?" Jake asked. "Maybe 30 minutes before we have engine failure for real this time," Steve replied. Jake knew they needed a better plan than just running through asteroids. The Zephyrian ships were faster and would eventually catch them once they cleared the rocky field. But humans had one advantage that the aliens had not considered. "Claire, plot a course for the sun," Jake ordered. "Sir, that would be suicide," Claire replied with shock. "The radiation and heat would kill us long before we got close enough to matter." "Not that close," Jake said with a smile. "Just close enough to make things interesting." The Liberty burst out of the asteroid field and began accelerating toward the star at the center of the system. The Zephyrian fleet followed, but Admiral Kethvar was confused by this apparent suicide run. "What are they doing?" he asked his science officers. "Are they trying to destroy themselves rather than join the Empire?" "Unknown Admiral," replied Chief Scientist Mordak. "Perhaps their primitive minds have broken under the stress of meeting a superior civilization." But Jake Morrison's mind was working perfectly. He had noticed during the chase that the Zephyrian ships seemed to avoid areas of high radiation or electromagnetic interference. Their advanced sensors might actually be a weakness if they could be overwhelmed with too much information. "Steve, I need you to vent everything we can spare," Jake ordered. "Atmosphere, coolant, fuel, anything that will create a cloud around us. Captain, that will make us easier to track, not harder," Amy Sullivan protested. "Trust me," Jake replied while watching the star grow larger on their screens. The Liberty began dumping everything it could spare while accelerating toward the sun. A massive cloud of gas and debris formed behind the ship, creating a trail that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The Zephyrian sensors detected the cloud easily, but something unexpected began to happen. As they approached the star, the solar wind began interacting with the debris cloud from the Liberty. Charged particles from the sun hit the gas and metal fragments, creating an enormous electromagnetic storm that spread across space like a glowing aurora. What is happening to our sensors? Veltar asked as his screens filled with static and false readings. The beautiful Zephyrian ships had sensors designed to detect the smallest details across vast distances, but the storm created by the Liberty's debris cloud was flooding those same sensors with so much information that they could not filter out the noise. The alien ships were essentially blinded by their own advanced technology. "We are losing contact with the human vessel," reported Darwin. "The electromagnetic interference is too severe." Admiral Keithavar ordered his ships to back away from the solar storm, but it was too late. The Liberty had disappeared into the chaos of charged particles and debris, while the Zephyrian fleet struggled to regain sensor contact inside the storm. Jake Morrison felt his ship shaking as radiation and solar wind battered their hull. The temperature inside the Liberty was rising rapidly, and radiation alarms were starting to sound throughout the ship. "Captain, we cannot stay here much longer," Dr. Kevin Nash warned while checking radiation levels. "The exposure will kill us within hours." "Just long enough to change course," Jake replied. "Claire, can you plot a new heading while we are hidden in this mess?" "Already done, Captain," Claire said with excitement. "I have a course that will take us out of the system using the storm as cover." The Liberty changed direction while hidden inside the electromagnetic chaos it had created. By the time the Zephyrian fleet regained sensor contact, the human ship was already racing toward the edge of the star system on a completely different heading. "Impossible, Keth," Var said while staring at his displays. "How did they escape from that radiation storm and change course without us detecting them?" The chase continued, but now the Zephyrian admiral was beginning to realize that he might have underestimated these primitive humans. Their crude ship was performing maneuvers that should have been impossible, while his advanced fleet struggled to keep up. Across the galaxy, millions of beings watched the pursuit on their screens. What had started as entertainment was becoming something else entirely. A single primitive ship was making the mighty Imperial fleet look foolish, and citizens throughout Zephyrian space began asking uncomfortable questions about their military's competence. The chase had been going on for 3 days, and Admiral Keithvar was no longer amused. The primitive human ship continued to escape from situations that should have been impossible, while his advanced fleet struggled to predict their next move. Worse, the entire galaxy was watching and laughing at the Zephyrian Empire's inability to catch a single cargo hauler. "Admiral, we are receiving complaints from the High Command Sub-Commander," Veltar reported with obvious embarrassment. "They want to know why an entire Imperial fleet cannot capture one primitive vessel." Keithvar did not have a good answer. The human ship called Liberty seemed to break every rule of space combat that the Zephyrians had learned over 3 centuries. It performed maneuvers that should have killed its crew and survived damage that should have destroyed its hull. The latest escape had been particularly humiliating. The humans had flown directly through a solar flare, while the Zephyrian ships were forced to retreat to safe distance. When the radiation storm passed, the Liberty was gone again. "How do they survive these conditions?" asked Chief Scientist Mordak while reviewing sensor data. "Our computer models say the radiation exposure should have been lethal." "Perhaps their biology is more resistant to radiation than we assumed," suggested Medical Officer Helva. "Some primitive species develop crude adaptations to harsh environments." On the Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison was dealing with his own problems. The constant stress of running from superior forces was wearing on his crew, and their ship was showing signs of serious damage. Chief Engineer Steve Parker reported multiple system failures and warned that their engines could not take much more abuse. "Captain, we have microfractures in the hull, coolant leaks in 3 compartments, and our navigation computer keeps glitching," Steve said while reviewing damage reports. "This old girl has given us everything she has, but we are running out of tricks." Jake knew Steve was right, but he also knew they could not give up. The Zephyrians had made it clear that surrender meant the end of human independence. His crew had families back in human space who were counting on them to stay free. "What about the nebula ahead?" Jake asked Navigation Officer Claire Mitchell. "Could we hide in there long enough to make repairs?" Claire studied the stellar cartography data with Science Officer Dr. Kevin Nash. "It is possible, Captain, but that nebula is full of charged particles and electromagnetic storms. Our sensors will be useless inside, and we could easily get lost." "The Zephyrians will have the same problem," Jake pointed out. "Maybe worse, since their sensors seem more sensitive than ours." The decision was made, and the Liberty plunged into the colorful chaos of the Helix Nebula. Inside the cloud of gas and dust, their screens filled with static and their instruments went crazy from electromagnetic interference. But Jake had spent years navigating through debris fields and asteroid belts, so flying blind was not completely new to him. "Cut engines to minimum and use only maneuvering thrusters," he ordered. "We drift through this mess like we are just another piece of space junk." The Zephyrian fleet followed, but their beautiful crystal ships were not designed for the harsh environment inside the nebula. The charged particles interfered with their exotic matter. Reactors and their sensors provided conflicting information. "That made navigation dangerous, Admiral. We are losing formation," reported Flight Commander Zektar. "The interference is affecting our ship-to-ship communications, and several vessels have already suffered minor system failures." Keth Var was forced to slow his entire fleet to prevent collisions with nebula debris or each other. The humans had once again found a way to neutralize the Zephyrians' technological advantages by choosing a battlefield that favored primitive equipment over advanced systems inside the nebula. Jake Morrison was discovering just how resourceful his crew could be when their lives depended on it. Engineer Tony Garcia had figured out how to use the electromagnetic storms to recharge their batteries. Mechanic Beth Williams found ways to repair hull damage using materials they had collected during their garbage runs. Even Communications Officer Lisa Carter managed to create a crude navigation system using radio signals that bounced off dense gas clouds. "Captain, I think I found something, Dr. Kevin," Nash said while studying readings from their primitive sensors. "There appears to be an abandoned structure deeper in the nebula. Could be a research station or maybe an old mining facility." Jake decided to investigate, hoping they might find supplies or equipment that could help with repairs. What they discovered was far more interesting than an abandoned station. The structure was a Zephyrian research facility that had been studying the nebula's unusual properties. It was not abandoned but rather automated and operating without crew. The facility had been there for decades, collecting data on exotic particles and energy phenomena. "This is incredible," Dr. Nash said while reviewing the alien research data. "They have been studying ways to harness the energy from this nebula, but their technology is too advanced. The exotic particles interfere with their equipment." Jake realized they had stumbled onto something important. "Can we use any of this research to help with our situation?" "Maybe," Captain Nash replied with growing excitement. "The Zephyrians discovered that the nebula contains particles that can disrupt exotic matter reactions. That is why their ships have trouble operating in here. But our primitive chemical engines are completely unaffected." This gave Jake an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Can we collect these particles and use them as some kind of weapon?" "Not a weapon exactly," Nash said while working through calculations, "but we could create a cloud of these particles that would force the Zephyrian ships to shut down their engines. They would be dead in space until the particles dispersed." The plan was risky, but Jake's crew had already proven they could accomplish impossible things when working together. Over the next several hours, they modified their cargo holds to collect and store the exotic particles that were causing problems for Zephyrian technology. Meanwhile, Admiral Kethvar was growing more frustrated as his search of the nebula